Welcome to the Intentionists podcast, where we explore the interplay between intuition, spiritual health, and everything in between. I'm your host, Aimee Schreiber.
And I'm Hillary Zwallen. Our intention is to create a dialogue that inspires you to consciously forge your path with curiosity and compassion for life and its mysteries. Hello, fellow Intentionists. In today's episode, Aimee welcomes expert empathy translator Emily McDowell to discuss her personal journey reinventing her career and life through establishing her globally recognized greeting card company and the mental and spiritual evolution that has unfolded along the way. For those of you who have a side hustle, who aspire to be entrepreneur, or who are maybe currently running a business, this is the episode for you. She detailed her unexpected high-speed path from the advertising world to entrepreneurship and shares hard-won wisdom on how untangling her sense of self-worth from a hustle mentality has made all the difference in creating a sustainable container for expressing her purpose. Emily discusses meditation and self-parenting as a spiritual practice, additional tools that she's found useful, and ideas she's currently exploring as part of her process to integrate spirituality into her work and make it more accessible. They close by discussing the responsibility of having a platform and how Emily's experience with cancer and loss created a foundation for radical empathy that lies at the heart of her work. A little bit about Emily. Emily McDowell is a writer, illustrator, and entrepreneur who specializes in chronicling the human condition. In 2012, she launched the Emily McDowell Studio, making greeting cards for the relationships we really have. Now known as Emily McDowell and Friends, the brand's cards and gifts are sold online at emilymcdowell.com and in nearly 2,000 stores worldwide. Her work has been featured by the New York Times, Good Morning America, NBC Nightly News, BBC News, and NPR's All Things Considered, among many others. And in 2015, she was named one of Slate's 10 designers who are changing the world. Emily's first book, There's No Good Card for This, What to Say and Do When Life Gets Scary, Awful, and Unfair to People You Love, co-authored with Dr. Kelsey Crowe, was released in January 2017. In 2018, the Emily McDowell Studio merged with Knock Knock and People, Places, and Things, formerly Sisters of Los Angeles, to create the Who's There Group, one company housing 3 distinct brands. Emily now serves as equity partner and SVP of strategy at the Who's There Group, while remaining creative director and founder of Emily McDowell and Friends. You can find her on Instagram, and I highly suggest that you do, at Emily McDowell _EMILYMCDOWELL_ for the brand, and at Emily on Life for Emily. She has a Facebook page at Emily McDowell Studios and a website, emilymcdowell.com. And without further ado, Aimee and Emily, thanks for listening.
Thank you so much for talking with me today, Emily. You're definitely at the top of my favorite Instagram feeds.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I've been known to visit your page whenever I need a little pick-me-up and a laugh. So I'm super excited to learn more about your journey and the process of putting these hilarious and very potent and beautifully illustrated bits of truth out into the world. So
thank you so much. Yeah.
Can you take a moment giving listeners a summary of your journey kind of from the advertising world into running your own business with all these products available nationwide?
Yeah, sure. So I worked in advertising for about 9 years, and starting at about 5 years in, I knew that it wasn't quite what I was supposed to be doing, but I didn't have any idea what I was supposed to be doing. And I felt like I had invested too much time and it was like, I felt like I could leave, but I've already built all this up, in 5 years. And It was actually not that much time, but I felt like I'd put in so much time, and I felt like, well, if I move agencies, if I, move around. And so I moved around a lot. And ultimately the thing that I figured out that all of these clients and all of these people and agencies had in common was me. I was the thing that didn't work. So in 2011, I quit my last full-time job in order to freelance and figure out what I actually wanted to do. And at that time, I did a spiritual psychology program. Well, I started it. It was a 2-year master's program. And I started it with the intention of trying to figure out what I was supposed to do with my life. And I ended up I was freelancing during the day. And then at night, I started to just draw pictures and write things and do comics, and kind of going back to what I loved to do as a kid. And I started putting them on a Tumblr blog because people wanted to see them, just friends. And people started saying, you should sell these, you should sell these. And I was not a business-minded person, or I didn't think of myself as a business-minded person. I had never really been a person who had thought about entrepreneurship And, I stopped taking math in 11th grade, and like I
Mhm.
was not thinking of myself in that way. But I opened an Etsy shop and I started selling prints of my stuff that I just printed at home on a printer. And I really wanted to make cards because cards felt like they combined the things that I loved, which was writing, illustration, and psychology, like how people think.
Mhm.
And I also had always had trouble finding cards that I felt like spoke to me and to my reality. But I just was like, how do you make a business selling something that costs $4? Like, how do you do that?
Right.
So it took me a little while to just decide to like do it. And instead of, printing them myself and like cutting them and folding them, to actually just find a printer online and do the smallest possible print run. And I had a Valentine's Day card idea that I was like, this just needs to be in the world.
Mhm.
It just doesn't matter if anyone ever buys it. I know that if it gets in front of people, people will buy it because it solves a problem. And it was a Valentine for the person that you're kind of dating, but not really.
Uh,
And at the time, there was nothing like that. So I made it. And then, in a massive stroke of luck, Etsy put it on their Facebook page.
oh, wow.
And it was Etsy's most liked and shared post of that whole year.
Can you say what that card was?
Yeah.
Like, do you
So,
remember it?
okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. So it's a card that is basically, when you're dating someone and it's new and you're kind of like, are we a couple? I don't know. And Valentine's Day is
Mhm.
coming and you're like, shit. Like, either you give them something normal and then you have to give them a speech like, oh, this isn't that big of a deal. Like, here you
Yeah.
go. I got you a thing. Or you give them nothing. And then that's weird too, because maybe they got
Mhm.
you something. And so the card was it was basically the text of what that speech is. So it
Uh,
says like, I know we're not like together or anything, but it felt weird to not say anything. So I got you this card. It's not a big deal. It doesn't even have a heart on it. So basically it's just a card saying hi. And then in tiny letters, it says, forget it,
yeah.
at the end.
So great.
And people really responded to it. And it ended up like on the front page of Reddit and on Funny or Die and BuzzFeed and Cosmo and like
Mhm.
just all over the place. And I had a week to sell them because lesson number one about selling something on the internet for a holiday is like you should make it for sale before 2 weeks before that holiday.
Yeah.
And you have to like cut off your shipping a week before so that people can get it.
Mhm.
So I actually only had a week to sell it and I sold 1,700 of that card one by one to
Wow.
people all over the world. And I had to figure out how to get them out and how to make it happen. And I was like needed, and it was like I had no time. So it was because I had to mail them immediately. And so I was like going to paper stores and buying envelopes and like just desperate. Like I knew obviously I shouldn't buy my envelopes at paper stores, but I was also like, I have no wholesale place to buy anything.
Yeah.
And I'm not even
Wow.
a business yet. So like, I got to make it happen. So I did that. And that turned into, it was essentially a market test. Like, okay, there is something here. I have something to say. Like, I can see how this would work. Okay. And so that led to me kind of giving myself a Google MBA on how to start a business and how to start a stationery business. And I ended up making a 40 card release and taking it to the National Stationery Show, which at the time was a big trade show that happened in May annually, and that is open to stores who are coming to buy for their stores. And I launched this wholesale collection in May of 2013. And that was kind of it. And then it just sort of took off from there. And it was a lot of building the plane while, learning to fly it at the same time. And one of the things that people don't see, like success is wonderful and great. And people refer to these as good problems to have, but there's
Mhm.
still problems in that you get an order that's like a $30,000 order, which I got from Urban Outfitters. But then they said, you have 2 weeks to ship us these cards or else we'll cancel the order. And like, I didn't even have the cards printed yet. I didn't
Oh,
have a space to
wow.
work out of. I didn't have any employees. I didn't have a business. And so there was so much just scrambling and scrambling and scrambling in the first few years to, just keep up and to deliver on what people wanted, which on one hand was amazing that people were wanting it. And then
Mhm.
we were also just a different company every 6 months because we were changing and growing so quickly. And so it was just
Wow.
this constant wheel of problem solving.
Wow.
Yeah.
What an incredible journey. It sounds like Yeah, it was just very learn as you go,
Oh yeah.
trial and error.
Yep.
I've read a couple of things that you've written about how kind of your mental evolution from this really kind of like the hustle mentality of like this endless striving, which is necessary in the beginning,
Hmm.
building a business and like you're learning all these things. But it seems like over time, you've kind of, through your own trial and error, have found a way to kind of create that doesn't result in burnout. And can you describe more about like that mental
Absolutely.
evolution and how you
Yes.
reached that point?
It has been a long journey to get here. And I think that the hustle culture that is really prevalent right now and all over social media and just that whole thing is actually really dangerous,
Hmm.
because it's not sustainable. Like nobody can work that way all the time. And we sort of get taught that that kind of quote unquote success is what's going to make you happy and it's what's going to fulfill you. And like, even if you're doing something that you feel is really aligned with your purpose, if you're not taking care of yourself, like if you're ignoring all of your own needs as a human being in service to this work or this company or this thing that you're building, it's eventually going to catch up with you.
Hmm.
And it's just not a sustainable way to live. And for me, the thing that I had to really wrap my head around, I mean, it was two things. Like one, I just basically hit a wall where I had been, because I was the CEO of the company and I was doing all of the creative, I was doing all the writing and all of the illustration, and I was also doing all of the marketing. And
Wow.
I had 15 employees that were reporting to me, and we had our own warehouse in another state, and half of the business was wholesale and the other half was direct to consumer, which is our website. And
Mm.
those are two separate businesses. Essentially, it's like they have different schedules and different needs and different marketing and different fulfillment. And so it was like running two businesses. And I had tried to license out the wholesale half of the business. And it turned out that the partner that I had worked with was dishonest. And I lost all the money I'd made and saved
Oh, wow.
in 2017 in having to buy back the business from them. And then they went under. And it was very, very ugly. And then I ended up with a thing that I didn't even want in the first place, which was the full business back under my roof. And so I really had hit a wall of I have to figure out a different way to do this because I can't do it.
Mm.
And then at the same time, one of the things that when I went to this spiritual psychology program back in 2011, I don't think that I was really ready. I was ready to change my life in terms of my purpose, but I wasn't totally ready to make the internal shifts that I've ended up making in this last year and a half or so. And I ended up dropping out of the program in my second year because the company took off and I couldn't
Mm.
do both at once. And what I ultimately had to go back to and figure out for myself was the sense of all of the hustle and all of the motivation for the hustle was ultimately for my own worthiness. Like it was all based on this idea of, in order to feel good about myself, I have to be this person who achieves this. Like my identity is this, and this is who I am, and this is how I feel good about myself, and these are the things that I can create, and look at what I can build, and like look at what I can do.
Mm.
And that was how I felt like a worthy human being. Like those were the things that made me feel good. And it's interesting because when we think about our identity and we think about letting go of it's one thing to let go of the things that you don't like about yourself, right? Like you are recognized like, oh, I am kind of like a drama queen, or I am,
Yeah.
this way in relationships and I don't like it. And you do this work to recognize those things and heal those parts of yourself and let go, whatever. But it's another thing to recognize that the parts of yourself that you had always felt gave you the things that you liked about yourself
Mhm.
were actually damaging you and were actually like keeping you imprisoned in a way and like prolonging your suffering or basically creating your suffering. And that was the biggest shift for me, was recognizing that all of these things that I had pointed to for literally like 30 years as being what made me a functional, cool, interesting, worthy person were actually the things that were destroying me and that were keeping me from being happy, and that no amount of success, like external success or hustle or whatever it was going to fix that for me.
Wow, that's such an interesting, important point. I love how you bring up the fact that it's these positive, like the seemingly positive things about ourselves that are, those are the ones that are like buried deepest of all, like underneath
Hmm.
everything. So that's some serious work that you did to make that shift.
Definitely, definitely. And it's not, it's all sort of a work in progress,
Uh,
but really recognizing that this thing that I was perpetuating and this need, like this feeling of like, I need to grow this, I need to do this, I need to do this, was coming from, was all coming from me. And it was all coming from ultimately my own need to feel good about myself.
mm,
And realizing that, like, wait a minute, like, this is actively making me not feel good about myself because my life doesn't exist outside of this business. It's
uh,
miserable. Like, my existence is miserable. I'm unhealthy. I'm not sleeping. I have all these, like, physical, mental symptoms. My relationship is a mess. I never see my friends. Like, just everything and pleasurable was gone in service to the hustle. And I felt like a hypocrite because from the outside, people were like, "Oh my God, you have this amazing thing." And like, you're like
uh.
living your dream and your truth, whatever. And it was like, yeah, sort of, like, I guess, but also really I'm not. And the big shift that I ended up making was in the beginning of 2018. I went into business with a company called Knock Knock. We merged with them. And
Mm,
Knock Knock is a publisher, gift books and stationery and sticky pads. And everyone listening probably has one of their pads on their fridge that says like all out of, and it's like funny checklists, and like
uh,
they've been around forever. And they've been around since 2002. And they were much bigger than we are and much more established with their systems. And the founder was a friend of mine. And she and I had been talking for years about potentially merging the companies. And she was watching me go through the pain that she had gone through in the first, 5 years of building Knock Knock. And I had always said, like, yeah, no, like, that sounds great, but like, no, I'm doing it myself. I'm doing it myself. I'm doing it myself. And I reached a point where I was like, why? What am I doing? Like, why am I doing this myself? What do I want out of this company? What do I want out of my life? Like,
mm,
and, one of the other things that's really tough, I think, about being an entrepreneur and that people don't really talk about is the default in our culture is if something is successful, grow it, make it bigger, like bigger, better. If people want it, make more, like,
mm,
you know, build an empire. And that's actually not necessarily always the best thing to do, not only for yourself as a lifestyle, but for the financial health of the company. Like, there's kind of a sweet spot where, because it's not about revenue, it's about profit, right? And so,
mm,
like, after a certain, like, there's a sweet spot of where you work and you have a nice amount of profit, and those things kind of balance each other. And then maybe you can bring on a bunch of people and you can bust your ass and you can make an extra, you can go from $4 million to $8 million in revenue. But if that only brings in an extra $500,000 in profit, is that worth it? Or did you just create so much more work for yourself for kind of no reason? And that's a real thing that happens. So I was really kind of looking at how much time I spent on the back end of the business, because really the creative, I only spent about 15% of my time on it. And the rest of it was managing the business. And I didn't love it, and
yeah,
just because, and I wasn't bad at it. Like, it turns out I was actually pretty good at it.
mm,
And that was part of what kept me in it, because if I had been terrible at it, I would have had to bring someone else in to do
right.
it. But because I could, I was always like, well, I'll eventually like this. And like, no, that's not how it worked. And so I ended up in January of 2018, we merged with Knock Knock, and we now share, and we have the brands are totally separate still, but we share an office and we share resources and we share the back end. And I'm now an equity partner in the joint company. And so I still run our brand, and I also do sort of executive level strategy for both brands and product development and that kind of thing, which I do really like doing.
Oh, nice.
But I don't have anything to do now with like operations and fulfillment and customer service and like all of these aspects of the business that I was overseeing and that were just not like that I shouldn't have been, you know?
Mhm. Nice. So in order to get to that point of collaboration, you first kind of had to disentangle your own self-worth
Yes.
from the process and like really
Yes.
examine all that.
And really examine, like, because there was a part of me that was like, no, I should be able to do this myself. Like, I should be
Uh-huh.
able to build this. I should be able to, and like, where is that coming from and why? And what does that should mean? And like, who says who, you know? And isn't the point of this, the whole point of creating something like this is to love what you do. And the only thing I knew was that I did not love what I was doing.
Mhm. Wow, yeah, those are all the important questions. To go along with that, back in August, you made this kind of spirituality coming out post, and I'm assuming this was kind of in the flex of everything here.
Yes,
Um,
totally.
so it was kind of this heads up that you went down the rabbit hole and things are shifting and might get weird, you know, as you kind of
Yeah.
embrace the unknown territory. Was there a certain like specific experience that was the catalyst for this and saying it publicly?
Not necessarily for saying it publicly. It was becoming a more important part of my life. And one of the things that, like, if I had to distill what my gift is, or, you know, what my kind of purpose is down to one thing, I feel like it is translating. Like, if you look at what we do and look at the cards and look at like empathy cards and all those things, it's figuring out how to translate emotions and ideas into words that make sense to people and that
Mhm.
resonate with people, and that people can wrap their head around. And one of the problems that I have had with spirituality, or like the issues that I've personally had, is when I was first kind of trying to get trying to wrap my head around these ideas starting, you know, years back, the language didn't feel like it spoke to me.
Mhm.
Like, and that was my own stuff, you know, like, but I felt like I had a hard time with books with rainbows on the cover and flowers, like the sort of floralness of the language, or like some of the stuff I was like, I really want to get into this, but it doesn't feel like me. And again, that was like, that was like I had a very concrete idea of like who I was. And that was like what I would cling to until the day
Mhm.
I died, you know?
Right.
But at the same time, I needed to start getting into that stuff and start allowing those ideas in before I was able to start seeing and kind of deconstructing my identity a little bit and being like, maybe I could be a person who's into this. And I think that a lot of people are in that same place where a lot of the ideas that are contained in sort of spiritual practices and premises are things that would resonate with them and would help them,
Mhm.
but they're packaged in such a way that it kind of turns off a lot of people, or people feel like they can't access it. And so one of the things that I've really been thinking about is, you know, as my career evolves and as I do different things, is the next place that I go more of an evolution of, are these the things that I help to translate? Are these the kinds of things that I talk more about because they've been so transformative for me and because they've been so important for me? And so the sort of spiritual coming out post was like, it came out of me wanting to start posting about those things, and then also feeling like, is this just going to come out of like super left field? And, you know, maybe I'll just talk about that and talk about how this is becoming more of a part of my life. And like, here we go, you know, like, you're with me or you're not, and it's all good
Yeah.
either way. And so I ended up just kind of positioning it like that. And I was really curious to see how people would respond also,
Mhm.
because I genuinely really didn't know what people would think. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I loved when you posted this because I mean, like you're saying, you're an expert translator, and I kind of see you as this champion for normalizing and integrating these things and topics that seem kind of too big to look at.
Yeah.
And like all these things like death and illness and grief and parenting, all these things, you've made them more approachable for people through your art and through your products. And and this to me was like another example of like, oh, she's like bridging the gap on spirituality now. And it made me so excited because I mean, it struck me as brave too, because it was a little bit different than like what you were normally posting about.
Mm-hmm.
And as a business person, spirituality, it seems like it's not something that is mixed very often, like the normal people world and then the
No,
spirituality
right,
people world.
right.
So like, did it take a lot of courage? Were you nervous, or were you just mostly curious?
It was less nervous and more curious. I
Uh,
mean, I figured I might lose some people and like that would be okay, but I also, by the time I posted about it, felt pretty convicted that this was a direction that I wanted to go in my work. And
mhm.
so it was like, well, this is going to happen sooner or later
Right.
to some degree. So I might as well just talk about it in a way that if I was going to talk to a friend about it, here's how I would start that conversation.
So, are there specific practices that you are doing or exploring that, like, to build your spiritual connection, to explore it? Like, how do you integrate spirituality into your life?
I meditate every day for 20 minutes, sometimes half an hour. And I started with guided meditation and I still do guided meditation sometimes. And I think one of the things that when people hear meditation, they're like, oh, because like I know I was too,
Always the
like,
answer, yeah.
oh my God, shut up, like whatever. Um, and I think that a lot of people have the perception that guided meditation is somehow like not meditation, like that actual but like real meditation to get the benefits of it. It needs to be just like you and your breath and like a stream with quiet thoughts floating down it. And like,
Mhm.
that's totally not true. You can do a guided meditation and that is just as real and it'll give you just as much as, sitting quietly on a cushion with nothing but your thoughts. And I really encourage people, if you're curious about it, to, get like a free app like Insight Timer and start just listening to people and see. And there's so many teachers on there doing so many things that are range from 2 minutes long to, 2 hours. And you can sort of dip your toe into it and try it in so many different ways in a way that doesn't feel intimidating. It just feels like, oh, here I am playing with this app and see if you can find something that resonates with you.
Mhm.
And instead of trying to start by, I'm just going to sit here and quiet my mind, because that's tough,
Yeah.
and it takes practice. And like, I'm better at it now. I mean, it's also one of those things that like one day it will be great and you'll be like, I am awesome at this. This is awesome. Like, look at me go. And then the next day you'll just be like, shit, like I'm the worst. I suck.
Yeah.
Like, this is terrible. And it's not linear, in that way. And so I think, that's just another thing to know from my own experience. I consider taking care of myself a spiritual practice. And by
Mhm.
that, I mean actually showing up for myself and honestly, like parenting myself.
Yeah, the self-parenting, I was gonna ask
The
you about that. That's
self-parenting. Yep.
such a great term.
To me, that is like taking care of my own needs first, even if other people don't like it, or even if I don't want to do it. Like, there are things that I know that nourish me, like getting enough sleep, like seeing people I love, like making time for things like breath work class or yoga or eating food that is good, and that's nourishing. Like, those are all things that my brain and my sort of workaholic brain will say, those aren't important. You can do that later. You
Mm.
can, you do this work now. You can do that later. And for years, I really just pushed all of that stuff away and was like, no, like, I am building a company. I am hustling. Like, look at me, do this. And I put myself last. And I also, in a way, I had sort of had twisted my beliefs to think I was putting myself first, because I was like, this is all about like, I'm doing this for myself. Like, I am building my own thing. And like, and actually that's totally not what it was. I was building a thing. I was building a business, but that was not taking care of myself. And that is a really different thing. And so all of those things are things that I now, that really are priorities for me and that I build in time for. And those things, to me, I do view them as spiritual practices because I do them mindfully and they help me connect and ground and be in touch with who I am.
Mhm.
And I think anything that does that contributes.
Yeah.
I read a ton of books. My fiance is like, can you please read some fiction? Because every book is like, for every book for 2 years has been The Power of Now and, all
Yeah.
that. But I find them really helpful. There's a book called Frequency by Penny Pierce that I just finished that I really, really loved.
And what was that one about?
It's about the word frequent. It refers to the vibration of you and the vibration of everything. Since everything is energy and everything is, at an atomic level is energy, everything has a vibration and we each have our own vibration. And when you're in alignment, the difference between being in or out of alignment and in or out of coherence with your own, with this frequency that you're sort of meant to exist at, and what happens, what the results are in your life from being in or out of those things, and how to use your intuition to get back in if you're out, and how to recognize that you're out when you're, and so it's just this sort of comprehensive look at all that. And I just thought it was super interesting. And it takes me a while to get through them because I feel like one of the things I've done in the past is like do a bunch of reading and then just like put it back on the shelf and like forget about it and like nothing happens.
Yeah.
And so making the effort to integrate what I'm learning. And so sometimes it will take me like a few months to get through a book, but I'm also like actually trying to, actively working on the stuff that I'm reading about. And so that's been a big shift for me. Like, oh, you have to do it.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, okay, right.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Noted. I have to do it.
Yeah, I felt like I was meditating for years, but I was really just reading books about meditating for years before I actually started. So,
totally.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is along with like your intuition, is there a way that you visualize it for yourself? Like, is there like kind of some mental imagery or construct that you like to use that you found helpful at all?
For me, one of the things that I've been playing with, it's less about visualization. Like it's less about seeing things in my mind's eye and more about finding a feeling. Like, for example, if there's something that I am trying to manifest or something that I am, thinking about and kind of working on in my daily life, instead of, for me, this is just, and I know that some people really like to visualize this thing happening, like visualize that and have the whole visual thing. And for me, it's more about feeling as if it's already happened and finding what that feeling is like, and also being really careful to not put like too much meaning on it about, again, it's like going back to identity, right? And like who you are and like who you are as a person. And so I'm really careful, like if it's some sort of thing that I want to manifest in my life, practicing feeling the feeling, but also separating that from feeling good about myself or feeling like it means something about me as a person, like feeling the pleasure of the thing without also wrapping it up in, and therefore I feel good about myself because I'm worthy because this thing happened, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that's such an important point.
Okay.
I can already tell I'm going to have to go back and listen to this because this is really good stuff.
Totally. Thank you. It's all trial and error. Like I am a work in progress.
Yes, we all are. So along with there's this whole new world of kind of commercialized spirituality. And to go back to your point about like, it's really important how things are packaged. Like that kind of makes the difference between whether something's approachable or not for people. And I was so excited when you came out with your fantasy stones. For listeners, they're these little pins on cards with they're made up crystals. What's your favorite one?
Let's see. The Persistethist I really love, which is basically a fake crystal to help support all the ways that being a woman can be a pain in the ass. And so it's like this enamel pin that looks like a crystal, and it's called Persistethist. And then the uses are like it's for certain situations. You use it when you're feeling this way. Don't do this with it. Do this with it. More effective. So it takes the tropes of the way that we actually use real crystals and kind of apply them to everyday situations.
Right.
What's your favorite one?
I love the functional adultonite. I think it's so funny. Let me read for listeners. Its use is it activates inner guidance and brings clarity and direction to a meandering life path, reduces attraction to questionable relationships, jobs, and any situation warranting emergency text from a bathroom, assists in painless lesson learning, caution, alcohol reduces effectiveness. I thought that was great. And then like as a person who I have a few crystals sitting on my desk right now, but I
Hmm.
also enjoy laughing about my relationship to them. And I think that your products along these lines, and also like the astrology take the wheel logic, you had your chance, the
Yeah.
post-it note. I think these products like this are just such brilliant fun because you're kind of like, on one hand, you're poking holes in these constructs, but you're commenting on our deepest feelings of kind of bewilderment about and tendency to look outside ourselves for answers. Like I'm like
Hmm.
there's kind of that level of it. So can you like tell me more about your view on this culture of spirituality with its various tools and lines of study, and has any of it been personally useful to you? Like, are there certain things that you like to implement in your life along these lines? Or
Yeah. So, my general belief on this is that anything that helps people access ideas that help them, I'm all for it.
right.
So anything that functions as an access point for people to get into something that they otherwise wouldn't, or that, or also that kind of reflects their reality. I mean, I think one of the things that we do is we normalize some of the things that are not as often talked about,
Mm-hmm.
or are kind of fringe, or are, people feel like, oh, I'm the only person who does that, or whatever. And so I think having like like astrology take the wheel logic, you had your chance, is like, it's like sort of a joke but also sort of not.
Right.
And I think people really appreciate that, because it also kind of says like, yeah, we're all doing this, like we all are struggling with the same stuff, and we're all trying to figure it out and find something that helps guide us in whatever way.
Uh-huh.
And for me, I mean, yeah, I have an altar at home. I have, tons of crystals and, incense and objects that have personal significance to me, and things that I've gotten on my travels, and just things that it's just a place for me to sit in front of and center myself. Like, as much as anything, it was helpful for me initially in terms of having a place that helped my brain associate with, this is where we quiet down and go inside.
Mm-hmm.
When you're trying to form a habit and change those pathways in your brain, it helps to have, for me at least, to have some kind of external touch point of like, this is where we do that, like this is where that happens. It's like, Pavlovian, like, you sit down in bed and like reach for your phone or whatever,
Right.
whatever it is, like you're where you're, I'm trying to make those, I'm trying to foster connections in my brain between, this is this space, and this is what we do here,
Right.
and this is what this means.
Well, it helps. Yeah, it helps bringing all your senses into it. Something you can touch, something you can look at. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
it's harder to get lost in your mind, I think, especially starting out.
Definitely.
So, with your business, you have this really unique platform for activism of all sorts, and talking, just having these putting these conversations out into the world. Is this a response? Like, do you see this as a responsibility, and does it kind of weigh heavy on you? And how do you handle this weight, or is it? Do you kind of maintain like a sense of fun about it?
Um, well, I do feel that, it's hard to maintain a sense of fun when there's so much that's a mess right now,
Hmm.
and there's so much, like, I do feel like it's my responsibility, and it's the responsibility of anyone with a platform to amplify the voices of people who are marginalized, to talk about issues, to talk about things I believe in, and to try to make the world better, and to try to help, and to try to provide support in whatever way I can, for causes that I care about and for things I care about. And that is, just my own view. And it is one of the things that I like about having a company, about like being in charge of something, is that I get to make those decisions.
Hmm.
And I get to decide, like, we are going to give, these proceeds to charity, and we are going to do this, and we're going to talk about whatever it is, Black Lives Matter, or whatever it is, like whatever issue I'm feeling like we should talk about, we get to talk about those things. And if people don't like it, they don't need to buy our products, and they don't need to follow us on Instagram. And, you know, but for me, those things are important. And I feel a little bit like I'm very privileged to have this platform, and one of the ways that, I don't know, one of the ways that I can give back is to use it for good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So sounds like you go into it with this attitude that like you're trying to help better the world. And but you do like you have a really great skill in approaching these heavy topics with the right amount of sensitivity, I like in my opinion. And
Oh, thank you.
is this something that like you had to work at, or does this come from kind of knowing your own experience of suffering in various ways?
That's a good question. I think that radical empathy is at the heart of it. I try to put it at the heart of everything that we do. And I think that there are so many experiences that I have no idea what they are like. But I do have a lot of practice because of the work that we've done with illness and grief, and just the work that I've done on myself, and just kind of all of that together. My whole background puts me in a position of being able to talk about these things in a way that resonates with people, and that I hope contains the right amount of balance of sensitivity. And I never, I don't always know if I get it right,
Mhm.
but I try, and I definitely, just kind of all of the things I think in my background have contributed to that, and to that ability to convey those kinds of things.
Is there a certain experience that was extra transformational maybe that you were able to reframe your suffering and channel it into your work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole story of how empathy cards came to be. I had cancer when I was 24, and it really sucked. And it sucked not just because, like, duh, it sucks, you have cancer, like all of the things that you imagine that suck. But one of the things that really, like, surprised me of how sucky it was how lonely it was, and how people, even people that I thought that I was really close to, people just did not know what to say. And a lot of people bailed. Like, a lot of people turned away out of their own fear.
Mm,
And the way that I interpreted it, internalized it at the time, was, this is like my fault. This has something to do with me. That this means that these people don't love me. This means that my relationships weren't real. This means that, and I put it all on me, instead of being able to see it as what it actually was, which is, nobody, like, this is universal.
mhm.
This has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with our culture, and how we don't learn how to talk about things like illness and death that are terrifying, because we don't know how to talk about them. And so when we're confronted with them, people just feel like they have no tools. And I was young, I was 24, and none of my friends had ever, known anybody who died, or been, except for like a grandparent, or,
Mhm.
been sick, and so it was just a new thing for everybody. But instead of really being able to understand that, I carried around, these beliefs for a long, long time, that this was me, that this was something that, like, was wrong with me, that, like, yeah, people didn't know what to say, but, like, if I had been, like, better at having cancer, or cooler, or like a cooler person, or like better, like that none of that would have applied, that, like,
Mhm.
this experience would have been better for me. And it took another very close friend of mine getting sick, also right around the time that I quit my job in advertising.
Mhm.
One of my college roommates got cancer, and she was absolutely beloved by everybody who ever met her. And she passed away 4 months after being diagnosed. And I saw it from the other side, as being her friend and having a lot of mutual friends who are close to both of us, and really got to see, like, oh, wow, is actually, this had nothing to do with me, and everything to do with nobody knowing how to handle this, and nobody knowing what to do. And taking that pain, and taking that, because after I went into remission, I was like, I don't want this to be my identity. I don't want anything to do with it. Like, I want to just move on from this. This won't be a part of my identity moving forward. I want to, like, basically put it in a box and put it away and go live my life.
Mhm.
And it actually took me that many years to understand that that pain was actually the path that led me to my purpose, or one of my purposes. And that pain gave me perspective to be able to help solve this problem that was a cultural problem.
It is a problem. That's important work that you're doing to help give us these words and like translate and approach these things. Wow, that's a really powerful lesson that I appreciate that you've been able to take and share with the rest of us.
Well, thank you.
I know we're getting a little low on time, so can you take a minute and let our listeners know where they can find you online?
Absolutely. We are online at emilymcdowell.com. The brand Instagram is Emily McDowell _. And I actually just started a separate Instagram that is for my own non-product related writing.
Really?
So my personal writing and art. Yes. I just started it like 2 days ago. We are bringing on a team to help with social media for the brand for the first time. Like, I've done a post every single day for 6 years, and I need to walk away from that a little bit. And so we have an awesome team that is starting to help out with it. And it's going to focus more on the product end of things. And then my non-product stuff, so like kind of the thoughts and kind of some of the more, basically anything that's not a product is going to be posted on this other account that's called Emily on Life. And I just got it going a couple of days ago. And I'll still be on the main account too, but just not every single day, and, giving myself a little bit of balance.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was great.
Before we part, we'd like to say thanks for listening, and we hope you'll connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We would love to hear from you and appreciate all feedback, shares, and likes.
To learn more and subscribe to our newsletter, visit Intentionists.com. And no matter where you are or what you're creating, we send you love and invite you to breathe and begin.
See you next week.